Well, let's jump into our review here. We've got eight questions. I'm trying to hit on different things when we review, just to refresh on a lot of different things. So let's start with number 1. Because of Adam's sin, blank reigns over creation. Because of Adam's sin, what reigns over creation?
Satan?
I say death.
That's true. Death is the more specific answer.
Yeah. Okay.
Satan runs the world system.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is in Romans 5. We've read that. True or false? The Old Testament, I hate true or false questions, so there's always enough nuance, you're never sure. The Old Testament scriptures do not describe the resurrection of the dead, only the New Testament. Is that true or false?
I'm going to say false.
Good. Why do you say that?
Well, I figured I'd
Follow up.
It was a 50-50.
That's right, you're right.
The New Testament, it was preparing the way for Jesus, so it really wasn't brought up until the New Testament that Jesus was coming and what his purpose was.
Yeah, resurrection is very rare in the Old Testament, but it's not absent altogether. We looked at a few passages. What was that?
Don't they say the New Testament is the Old Testament revealed?
And yes, in the Old Testament, in the Old Testament and the New Testament is concealed or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a rhyme there. There's a few vague references to what could be viewed as resurrection. The real clear picture of resurrection is in Daniel 12, though. So there's one very explicit picture of resurrection in the Old Testament. So yeah, you're not going to find it much, but it is there. It is there. This is why the Sadducees, in the time of Jesus' mortal ministry, didn't believe in it. They didn't see it in the books of Moses, so they said, no, it's not there. If it's not there, why should we believe it? Number 3, which prophet was called up from Sheol to speak to a king of Israel? Called up by a medium. Which prophet was that?
Elijah came to my mind. That's what came to my mind.
Do you know which king it was? Which king asked for a prophet to be summoned?
It wasn't Nebuchadnezzar, no.
Samuel?
Samuel's the prophet. Good. And who is the king that summoned him? Saul. You remember, Saul and Samuel had a very special relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Samuel, as you read the story, you get the sense Samuel kind of saw him as a son. They had that kind of relationship. And towards the end of Saul's life, or Samuel's life, I should say, Saul's rebellion against God, remember, it caused God to reject Saul and his whole family for the kingship. And that broke Samuel's heart. He cried out to God about Saul pretty much till he died, because he was so heartbroken about what happened with Saul. But yeah, so remember, God wasn't speaking to Saul anymore because he had rejected him. And so Saul's desperate. He needs to hear from God something. And so Samuel's dead, but he's like, well, I guess I'll try Samuel. So he goes to the witch in Endor, breaks his own law as king, and asks to have Samuel summoned because he needs to hear from somebody that can help him. It's one of the most tragic things. That whole story is so dramatic and tragic, so sad. Number 4. Now on to cheery news, okay? Here we go. Name 3 blessings promised to God's people when Jesus returns. And this is on page 10 of your packet. There's a whole list that we went over. But if you can, on the top of your head, can you think of 3 blessings that will be given to God's people when Jesus comes back?
Life eternal.
Yeah,
Eternal life.
that's true. Now, it's hard to say that that's kind of a gift that's always being given. But yes, that's true. We will receive eternal life. But let's touch on a nuance of that. we're going to be alive even before Jesus' return. Like, even if we die, we're still alive, really. So what is it that's changed when Jesus comes back about us?
Our bodies.
There it is, right? Our immortal bodies. That's one of the blessings. Immortal bodies. And that's ultimately, I think, what the bottom line is about eternal life, is it's eternal physical life. It's not just existence. We will live eternally in a body, because we're human. Good. Anything else? What other blessings can we look forward to at Jesus' return?
No more sickness, sadness.
Yes. No, we're going to dig into that today. That's right.
Salvation.
What's that?
Salvation.
Salvation. Specifically from what? When he comes back, from what will he save us?
Death.
Hell.
Death, hell, Satan, right? He's being cast into the fire, Antichrist, all the forces that are against God's people. And that's one of the things we saw. He's going to give relief to his suffering people. That's a blessing he's going to give us. Another one is the community. He's going to gather us together to him. Remember, it's not an individual thing. We're going to be together, and that's going to be a blessing. We get to be gathered together. And then there's rewards, there's glory, and all this. There's a lot of blessing. All right, let's go to the back of the page there, number 5. We looked at this. When Jesus returns, he'll come with glory, but whose glory? With whose glory will he come? And there were 3. This is probably page 9 of the packet. He'll come with the glory of, there you go, the Father.
The angels.
The angels.
In his glory.
And his own glory, that's right. That is some glory cubed, y'all. I mean, oh my goodness. I'm not sure we know what that means, but oh my goodness, that's going to just erupt in our skies. The glory of God, of the Son, Jesus, and of all the angels coming with him. That's going to be quite a marvel. Number 6, what did Jesus promise to make sure that his disciples would not be deceived by the false reports of his return? Remember, he said, don't believe him if they say, oh, there he is, or oh, there he is. He said, don't believe that. Why?
Nobody knows. Like, he doesn't even know.
Well, but what did he promise about his return that means we don't have to fall for that stuff?
We'll know.
How? What did he say? Do you remember? How did he describe it?
The sound, trumpets, clouds, angels singing.
Yeah, there's a lot. Unmistakable, right? In that particular text, though, when he said, don't listen to them saying here or there, what did he say? His coming will be like what?
Blazing fire. Like a thief.
No, like when lightning strikes, right? He said, if it strikes on that side, you can still see it over there on that side. And so he said, like lightning that flashes in the east is visible in the west. So his promise was, and you already said it, but his example was lightning. You won't miss it. You know, no one will have to tell you. Because like lightning, it'll be visible. Even if you're not directly under it, it's going to be very obvious to you no matter where you are. And that's really, really important because there have always been people trying to claim this stuff. Oh, I found him. He's in a cave over in the Mideast. Oh, he's in a mansion in Miami. What are you talking about? You're not going to have to tell me if he comes back. Number 7, in what ways will Jesus' return resemble a militaristic invasion? You've mentioned some of the details already, but what's some of those that seem like an invasion?
A trumpet will sound.
The trumpet blast is very militaristic, yes. In the ancient world, nowadays you don't really want to announce that you're coming. You know, you just show up with the thunder of machinery. Anything else seem like an invasion? Well, what about an army? Is there any...
There's going to be all the people who are there. Or, how does that go? I always get confused with this, but because there's people who are in heaven and they are coming back
Yes.
as well.
Yes.
They're all coming, the angels and the people who are already in.
Very good. The skies will be full of God's holy angels, and they'll be very much army. Okay, they're not coming just to sing and say He's back. I mean, they're going to be militaristic. The armies of heaven, meaning the angels, but also the departed righteous ones are coming to get their new bodies. That's right. The blazing fire, of course, of His coming represents the judgment, so that the putting down of His enemies is very much militaristic. Jesus is not coming for peace this time. He's coming to end the war with power. So there's a lot there. The voice of the archangel, don't know what he's going to say, but that sounds like a general's command almost. And you can also say a part of that invasion is the evacuation of His kingdom citizens. He's going to evacuate His citizens before He punishes the dark system of the enemy. So there's a lot going on there. And the reason I keep bringing that up is I just want us to keep in mind this is a bigger cosmic event than just, oh good, we get to go home now. This is about us, but not entirely. It's about Him finally settling the cosmic struggle. And so I just want to always keep that in mind. There's so much more going on here than just, oh goody, we get to go to heaven now. Number 8, let's finish it here. A crown of righteousness is promised to all those who blank for His coming.
Prepare.
Ooh, that's good. That's not the word used in the text, but that's true. That's true. This is what Paul wrote to Timothy. This was on page
Wait for
page 10.
Yearn for His coming.
Yearn is a synonym. Yeah, I bet there's a translation that says yearn. Long is the anticipate. Yeah. So whatever your text will probably have a different word than mine, than the NIV, but it's as long as it communicates this idea. Yearning is a good word for that. Longing for it. It's not just that I know it's going to happen. It's that I really want it to. I can't wait. It's going to be so good. And that again speaks to whether we know Jesus or whether we just know about Him. And that's something that is clarified in the Scriptures. There's a big difference. All right. Well, we've come now. I have given you pages 12 through 15. We've actually already covered page 12 and most of page 13 last time. I printed it out because I didn't have it for you last time, so now you've got it in print. We spent most of our time last time looking at Isaiah 65. But before that, we looked at what is it going to be like when this age ends? When God puts this old order to rest, what's that going to look like? And remember, it's pretty violent. I mean, we're talking about fire, we're talking about all of the permanent things of nature being shaken one last time. And He said, if it's going to be shaken, it's going to disappear. But now we're going to get into what remains. Once all that old stuff is shaken and gone, what's left for us? Hello, my love. So just review some of the things with me from Isaiah 65, because we're going to see a lot of overlap here in Revelation 21. Okay? So I kind of did some bullet points about some of the big thoughts from Isaiah 65. I'll just read through them from page 13 here. Joanne, can you reach a packet for Christina there?
Oh, I can get it.
There we go. All right. So remember, the former things won't be remembered or brought to mind. That's one that we didn't really talk much about, but I really wonder what that means exactly. Because there's been a big question about our eternal future. Will we think about this life? And will we realize the loved ones that we aren't with now because they went to their punishment? All those questions come to mind. Is God going to give us a lobotomy of sorts, so we can't remember this stuff? So when you first read Isaiah 65:17, that's the impression you get. You're not going to remember any of this stuff anymore. But the reason I'm not convinced that's entirely the case is there's other references to this in the Old Testament that don't necessarily speak of complete forgetting, as much as it has no power now. It has no effect on us. There's no... It can't cause us grief. It can't cause us fear, that kind of sense to it, rather than a complete, wait, what happened before? What? You know, it's like, I can't remember anything, guys. It's more that it's just, it doesn't come up. It just doesn't come up anymore. And actually, I think this has a lot to do with what is our better understanding of forgiveness than the old cliche forgive and forget. Because I think we all know that's not happening. Like, I don't forget it, so am I failing to forgive? Well, remember, God never said he forgives and forgets. What he says is he forgives and does not bring it to mind. That's different than forgetting. That's a choice you make to not bring it up anymore. And I think that's probably more of what's going on here. It just, we won't dwell on things that cause us mourning. We're not. It's not. I don't know that we're going to forget everything, but we're not going to dwell on the things that will bum us out. You know, boy, you remember what tornadoes were like? Yeah, I lost my house in a tornado once. Oh, I'm sorry. You know, it's not going to be to that. We might say, hey, remember how there used to be tornadoes? I'm so glad I don't have tornadoes anymore. Boy, I'm glad to be done with that. So, no, I could be wrong on this. I'm just telling you, there might be more to this than just we can't remember any of it. There might be more nuance there. Gladness, rejoicing, delight over Jerusalem and its people. We're going to see the fuller picture of this Jerusalem thing in Revelation. It's pretty awesome. But look at all those words, gladness, rejoicing, and delight. I'll take some of that forever. You betcha. No more weeping and crying. We're going to see that picked up in Revelation also. Long life for all. No more lives cut short by death. He said no more babies born or dying early. No people, if you say, remember what the picture was that if you die at 100 years old, you'll be considered accursed. 100's too young. Nah, no one's going to die at 100. Work will be satisfying. We're going to be working, but it'll be satisfying. No one's going to take it from us. It's not going to be work all year and there's no crops that grow. It'll all be fruitful and satisfying. We'll be able to enjoy it. Work will always bear fruit, never be in vain. Just said that. We won't have to deal with worrying for our children or loved ones because God's blessing will be on everybody. And that's such a cool detail to me. He said you won't have to worry about your kids' welfare. You're like, why would you throw that in there? Because most parents know what that's like in this old order. And he said, don't worry about it. It's not going to be a part of your reality in the new world. God will be available and immediately responsive. He said, as soon as they call, and even before they're done calling on me, I'll be there. I'll answer them. Yes. Creation itself will live at peace. Remember we read about the animals, the wolf and the lion. They're going to get along with the lamb. They're going to get along with the sheep, and they're going to eat plants. They're not going to be mauling other animals to survive. What a picture. And then as we said, we brought up, as you brought up, Don, this thing about the serpent, still there in the picture, but what's it doing? Mm-hmm. It's eating dust, right? It has no prominent role. It's just underfoot. I share there my speculation, as I mentioned last week. I do think we'll be eating in our eternal form, in our eternal new world. We just won't be eating the flesh of living beings, living creatures like that have soul, like we do now. No harm or destruction, he said, in this new world. And then I just to remind you, there's a few things that at least cause me to think some of those pictures are poetic, not literal, because we don't expect any death at all. So for him to say, you won't have any babies dying young, why would he mention that if there's no death at all? And I think it's poetic just to show us how different it's going to be than this world. And the same thing is true of that serpent. Why would he bring that up if it's a perfect world? I think just to make his poetic point. Okay, so keep some of those things in mind, because now that we're going to Revelation 21, ooh boy, we're going to see some overlap. God willing, we're going to make it through this, look at the new world, and then we're going to look at some of the punchline of what do we do about it. because this life does affect that one. And that to me is some of the most meaty stuff for us to consider about the new world. So before we start, just to make an interesting connection, I think. Have you ever seen the movie American Tail? An American Tail? With the mouse? Okay. You should watch it. It's great. Anyway, I grew up watching this movie. And it's not a Disney movie, but it reminds you of that because it's got animals and the whole thing. But it's about this mouse family in Russia. And what's the time period? What'd you say? This is earlier in America. It's 1800s, right?
Probably.
Yeah. Okay. Anyways, so the New World, the American experience is still kind of new for the world, and everyone's still got this dreamy-eyed vision of what America's like. So to get a better life than you have, you go to America, where everything's great, you know. And so this family of Russian mice are getting ready to go on a ship to go to America. And everyone on the ship on the way to America they're just dreaming about what life's going to be there. And there's this song, "There are no cats in America." And the streets are made of cheese. You know? So they're just talking it up to each other because it's going to be paradise. And of course, once they get there, they all realize, oh boy, there are cats here, and there's not cheese readily available to anyone. The reason I bring that up is what we're about to read, I fear, it kind of has that vibe to a lot of people. It's nice talk, lovely sentiment, but nothing can be that good, you know? Like it's like mice talking about America this, right? It's lovely to sing about, talk about, but what's really true? When we disembark on this new land, what are we really going to find, honestly? So we have to actually decide every time we come to this, do I really believe this stuff? Or is this just nice thinking, makes us feel better when someone dies? Or is this actually true? Is this reality? So let's see what John saw. And this is a lot of reading. This is 2 chapters worth, and we're not going to necessarily read all of it because some of the details of the city I don't think we need to go into with too much depth here. But at least a good chunk of this I'd like to read, so we'll just kind of take turns reading sections of it. So if you don't mind, Don, would you read Revelation 21, verses 1 through 4? This is the end of John's vision in Revelation.
Okay. Making all things new. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, and the old heaven and the old earth had disappeared. And the sea was also gone. And then I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down from God out of the heaven like a bride, beautiful, dressed for her husband. I heard a loud shout from the throne saying, "Look, God's home is now among his people. He will live with them, and they will be his people. God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eye, and there will be no more death or sorrow or crying or pain. All these things are gone forever."
Now, I'm sure you've heard this one several times in your life growing up in church, particularly verse 4. This is one that we cling to with a special joy. But consider this with me, because what we're trying to do is get a realistic picture. What can we expect to experience forever? What is this really going to be like? Because a lot of us have probably heard things all through our lives that paint a certain picture, but we want to know, is that right? Is that true? As I read several quotes to you before about people responding to the typical vision of heaven, they really weren't all that interested in it. It kind of seemed boring to them and all that. So one of the reasons that we've been going through this whole study, this is the punchline. What is it really we can look forward to? So let's see what the details that John brings out. First of all that's old, the shaking we talked about last time, the shaking is so complete that all the old, the first version of everything is now gone. and it's been removed. So he has made new everything that was here before. And remember, that word new does not mean new in time, it means new in quality. And so it's fresh. It's fresh. It didn't just show up necessarily, but he made it fresh, okay? So, what do you make of this first detail that he gives about it? First he says it's new. Okay, cool. But the first detail we see in verse 1 is that there is no sea. I put on your paper here a question. Does the word sea here mean ocean like we would normally think of for sea? Or, and this is a thought that's kind of new to me since last year that this came, somebody told me about this, so that's why I'm asking the question. Or is it possible that he means the sea like the cleansing fountain? Let me explain. Because this changes entirely what this means, okay, when you see this. I grew up hearing, new heavens, new earth, there's no sea, and it was kind of a weird detail. Like, why doesn't God want there to be any large bodies of water in the new world? Like, what's that about? And I heard growing up, and it made enough sense for me to believe it. Well, the ocean represents separation, because it separates the continents, and as everyone knows, even if you're flying, it represents this major separation. But for the ancient people who couldn't fly, the ocean was like definitely separation, because they weren't that comfortable in large bodies of water. Some nations mastered the whole seafaring thing, but most were not real comfortable with it. And then they saw the big, deep waters as a place where the monsters were. It was a place of uncertainty and fear, because the storms could come up, the sea monsters could get you. It was just a real place of weird, scary stuff. So when I grew up, I heard that the idea that there's no sea probably has something to do with that there's no more great unknowns of fear for anybody. Or there's not a lot of separation.
This is what it says in the description below. It says the sea is gone as well. In John's time, the sea was viewed as dangerous and changeable. It also was a source of the beast.
That's true. In the vision, the beast comes up out of the sea. The sea also, in his vision, the waters around the prostitute lady on the beast. I know, weird, right? Okay. But that represents the nations. In Daniel's vision also, the sea, the churning waters, like you said, changeable, it represented the nations, the Gentiles. So there's something to that. That could be true. But then someone brought up this other option that totally was like, wait, what?
You don't thirst.
As you go through the book of Revelation, there's a few references to a sea of glass in front of God's throne. Chapter 4 is where this starts. Again, growing up, I had this whole different vision of this. The sea of glass I always thought was just this really big open space of glass, like as big as a sea, right, in front of God's throne. And I never knew what to make of that, but I was like trying to picture that, okay. Then someone pointed this out. The picture of God's throne room in the book of Revelation is very much well, I should put it the other way. The tabernacle and the temple that were built by Israel were supposed to be a copy of God's heavenly throne room. That's true. It says that in Revelation. It says that when Moses was given the plans for it. That's why he had to get it right when he made these objects, because it's a copy of God's actual throne room. So get this stuff right. Anywho, so God has a throne, which is like the Ark of the Covenant, where his throne was. There is an altar of incense in the vision in God's throne room, just like in the tabernacle and temple. Well, get this. When Solomon built the temple, there's a description of the sea made of bronze. That's the same word, sea, that's used here. A sea made of bronze, and it's on these 12 bowls, 3 on each, facing each direction, representing the 12 tribes of Israel. And do you know what the sea was there for? This big bowl with water in it? Cleansing for whom?
The priest.
The priests, right? Okay. So somebody's pointing all this out, and it starts to dawn on me what they're getting at. He said, what if, in the vision, John didn't see a big ocean of glass? What he saw was that sea, because throughout the vision he keeps saying how Jesus has purchased us to be a priesthood for God. And that there's this, the sea, clear as crystal, and that the priests of God here would of course, be cleansed by this thing, because now we're worthy to serve. So all this is like, whoa, this thought is new, but it's making sense to me. So then you get to chapter 21, and here's their suggestion. What if what John is saying is not that there's no ocean in the new world? What if he's saying, I don't see a sea in heaven anymore? It disappeared. When God made it new, because remember, heaven and earth is made new, not just earth. What if, when heaven and earth were made new, that cleansing fountain is gone? And if that's what's really being said here, what does that mean?
There's no need for it. Everybody's clean or pure.
Yes, there's no more need for cleansing anyways, because all impurities have been done away with in chapter 20, chapter 19. Oh man, this took on a whole new meaning. Now, both could be true, to be honest with you, because the word sea is the same word in Greek for both things. Greek usually helps like that, but it didn't help in this case. So either way, they're both true to some extent. If it represents scary, uncertain stuff, true, don't have to deal with that. But if it represents the need for cleansing to be worthy to serve the Father, that's not true either anymore, because no impurities exist at all. That's cool. Anyway, I thought I'd point that out, because when I learned about that, that kind of blew my mind. Like, where was that my whole life? Anywho.
Is it the word is exactly the same?
The word's the same.
Because in my translation, in Revelation, C is lowercase, and in 1 Kings, it's uppercase.
Yes, that's true.
I'm guessing that's just the translator's
Correct.
differentiation.
Yeah. Yeah, even in the Greek Old Testament, like I was really trying to find out what's going on here. In the Greek Old Testament, it's the same word for both. I'm like, darn it! I thought that was going to give me a clue. Anywho, do what you want with that. If that doesn't help you, that's fine. But I thought I'd throw it out there. The second detail is the city, the holy city. The holy city's always been Jerusalem, right? The holy city coming down out of heaven from God. By the way, this idea of a Jerusalem above is something Paul referenced in Galatians. John wasn't the first one to get this idea, that there is a heavenly city already in existence that's being prepared for this day when this stuff happens. Like, to be honest with you, when I picture heaven, I just picture this big, expansive place where God's there and angels are there. And I don't really picture anything else. It's just a big throne with a lot of angels around, you know. And because the scriptures don't really describe heaven. You can read a lot of books and watch a lot of movies now that will describe heaven to crazy detail. And just be careful with those, because a lot of their details don't add up to each other. But anyway, so to think that there is an actual city being built, being prepared, being made ready, doesn't that remind you of what Jesus said in John? He said, "In my Father's home are many rooms, or many living places. And if it weren't that way, I wouldn't tell you I'd come back and get you." He said, "But I'm going to come back and get you so you can be where I am." Doesn't that make you think of that? He's going away to prepare a place for us, and here it says the city coming down was prepared like a bride dressed for her husband. Oh my gosh, this is good. So apparently Jesus, sitting at the right hand of the Father, has been overseeing and directing this major project to prepare a city for his people, the bride, right? Oh, this is great. So, what's the big payoff for having the city coming down out of heaven to be on earth with us? Why is that such a big deal? Look at verse 3. The meaning of that city being here is not that the city's here primarily, but that the one who dwells in the city is going to be here primarily. So think about this. I'm trying to wrap my head around how significant this is, because I don't want this to be academic for us. I want this to really move us to worship. It's hard for us in the modern age, but try to go back with me mentally to a time of empire, okay? To a time of empire. And the British Empire actually didn't end that long ago. The British Empire, the Communist Empire, for instance, in Russia, okay? Think about these things. There's always a capital city of the empire. Now, in the British Empire, what was the capital city? Where does the Queen dwell?
London.
London. Now, the empire was so vast, the sun never set on the British Empire, right? That was their slogan. The sun never sets because it's everywhere. Everywhere on earth, wherever the sun's up, there's a part of the British Empire. So when people came to these colonies, 13 colonies in America, we were colonists of the British Empire, correct? The people who came here were British citizens. They had a British way of life. They spoke the British language, all that stuff. So before we became our own country, we were basically a piece of Britain that just happened to cross the ocean, but there you are. And when you were in the colonies, you were in Britain. So now think on this. What if, now this is absurd humanly speaking, but just go with me. What if the king/queen, whoever happened to be in charge at that time, really, really wanted to be with those colonists? They just really had this weird affection, okay, for these colonists. And so they commissioned all of their British subjects there on the island of England to, piece by piece, dismantle the city of London, transport it across the ocean, and build it in Boston. I don't know, pick a place. That's a picture of what's happening here, because the capital city of God is already where it is in heaven, and God is making the choice to transmit or totally move his capital city from where it is to be on this planet where the colonists have been. Of course, he's going to give the whole planet to the colonists now. But think about that. The capital city's moving. And he didn't just say, I'm going to make a new capital city down there. He's saying, let's take the one I've got and just move it, right? Have you ever considered what a major thing this is that he decided to do? It's just kind of crazy. Why would you want to go from heaven, Lord, and put it here? And the answer is because he's going to make this place to be pretty sweet. And the other answer is because this is where we are. Do you realize what a love God has to have for us to do this? To move his whole capital city to be on this planet where we are? Because remember, he created heavens and earth, and he's been in heaven the whole time. This is going to change it all, everybody. We think the incarnation of Jesus to spend 33-ish years here is big. Yeah, this is like eternally sealing the deal. Because remember, Jesus went back to Father. 33 and a half years later, he went back to Father. Now, they're permanently moving in. This is going to be, oh, that's so great. Okay. I don't know. The more I think of this, the more amazed I am that this happens. My whole life growing up, this is just an interesting picture. I wonder what it means. Now, the more I'm getting a hold of this, I'm like, he's going to do that? And that's why verse 3 is so powerful. Listen to what a loud voice from the throne. Now, who's on the throne?
God.
God and the Lamb, right? So either one of the Father or Son is talking. One of them. Look. I think it's the Son based on what's being said here. I'm picturing the Lamb speaking. Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. This is just like in Isaiah 65 where he said, I'll be right there. Before they're even done talking to me, I'll be right there to answer them. This is also like what God said to Israel, but so much better. Because he said, I'll be among the people of Israel in the Ark of the Covenant. Right? He said, I'll be among you. But that's nothing like this. Okay? This isn't a humanly made tabernacle or a humanly made temple where God's going to be among his people. This is like everything about God is going to be among us. This is so great. And then in verse 4, now that he's with us, what is he going to decide to do? This reference, he will wipe every tear from their eyes, is a direct quote from Isaiah 25. And I put that on here. But Isaiah 25 is where this line first appears. When he promises in Isaiah 25 to pull away the sheet, the shroud that covers the world, meaning death, he said he'll destroy death forever. He'll wipe every tear from their eyes. So what John is seeing is the final fulfillment of God's promise. All tears will be wiped away by God himself. Personally, I wouldn't mind if he sent some cool angel to do it for me. I'd still be very touched. Thank you, Lord. But notice what it says. The pronoun is he will. Because he's with us, he can do that. To everybody. Oh my gosh. And because he's with us, there's no more death. Because he is life itself. Death has no home here. God's here now. There's no mourning, crying, or pain. For the old order. The first things is literally what that says. The first things have passed away. That old order is the same word used for the first heaven and the first earth. First. All the first things are gone now. Everything's new. Everything's permanent. Oh, gosh. Okay. And then look at verse 5. Let's read 5 through 8. Barb, would you read those for us?
Yeah. He who was seated on the throne said, I am making everything new. Then he said, write this down, for these words are trustworthy and true. He said to me, it is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. To him who is thirsty I will give to drink without cost from the spring of the water of life. He who overcomes will inherit all this, and I will be his God, and he will be my son. But the cowardly, the unbelieving, the vile, the murderers, the sexually immoral, those who practice magic arts, the idolaters, and all liars, their place will be in the fiery lake of burning sulfur. This is the second death.
Okay. Back in verse 5, notice what he said. What is being made new? Everything. That's what we looked at last time. Everything will be shaken that can be shaken. Everything that is not permanent will be gone. All that's left is what's permanent. Everything's new. And then, look at verse 6. The words, it is done. What does that remind you of? Any other?
Jesus on the cross.
What Jesus said on the cross, it wasn't everything I ever want to get done is done. He meant this work I was given by the Father to do here is done. This is all done. Okay? The whole plan complete. So when Jesus said it on the cross, it was just a taste of this statement here. He was finishing one phase of the new creation plan. This statement is that the whole new creation plan is now complete. Mission accomplished.
Didn't he also say after he created everything?
Yeah, when he made
He didn't-
the earth, yeah.
Well, he didn't say, it is finished. He did say it is very good, and then he rested.
Yeah.
But there is that sense of completion, yeah. And I think you're right. This has that same sense. I've done it. I've created it all. That's awesome. Alpha and Omega, of course, is the first and last letter of the Greek alphabet. It's like saying I'm the A and the Z, beginning and end. And then look at verse 6. One of the things about our future life is that he will give to thirsty ones water without cost. It's free, generously provided from the spring of the water of life. Interesting, here we see the water of life, we get to drink from it. And in chapter 22, we see this picture that we get to eat from the tree of life. There's these two pictures, eating and drinking, and both bring life. Water of life, tree of life. We get to eat both, or consume both. Is this literal? I don't know. Actually, it probably doesn't matter too much whether it's literal or not, because the point is so good. And notice, doesn't this remind you of what Jesus said about kingdom living in the Beatitudes? Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Every desire of the human being, he's going to freely meet it. Thirst, hunger, whatever it is. He wants to meet the need for everyone who's there. And he will. Every need will be met. That's why I wonder, will we eat and drink and you say, well, you can't ever be hungry? Sure, but just because you aren't hungry doesn't mean you're not eating. In fact, doesn't all that mean is you have enough to eat, right? You only say, oh, I'm so hungry, when you feel like you haven't had enough to eat. When you've had enough to eat, what do you say? Oh, I'm so full. So the fact that we'll never hunger or thirst again doesn't mean we won't ever eat or drink. It just means we'll never lack. We'll always have enough to eat and drink. We'll always be satisfied. Verse 7 is very key, because notice who gets to have all this new creation. The overcomers, the victorious ones. Notice also in verse 8, the first on the list of those who don't get to have part in this is what? What's the first word?
Cowards.
Just so you know, the whole theme of the book of Revelation is the overcoming. The overcoming disciple of Jesus receives all of his promises. This is a pretty interesting part of this vision, because the overcoming ones are the courageous ones who cling to Jesus no matter what. The cowards are the first ones listed that are locked out. And you think, coward doesn't seem like such a big sin. Well, he's not just talking about people who are afraid of spiders. What is he talking about here? Those who let go of Jesus to save their own skins, or to save their own lives, or to keep their own comfort, or whatever it was. And so the reason I think that coward is first on the list is this is a warning for the disciples of Jesus. Do not be cowardly. Do not be ashamed of Jesus. Do not hide your allegiance to him in this dark world. Because the cowardly who do that, they don't get to share in this. This is only for those who overcame, who were victorious, who were courageous. So to me, that's an important part. Notice in verse 7, this is all called an inheritance, right? This is all an inheritance. Do you earn an inheritance? No. Why do you receive an inheritance? Because you're a part of the family. And that's why, isn't it wonderful? He says, I'll be their God, they'll be my children, or he'll be my son. The new NIV is more gender neutral, so it doesn't just say son, it says my children. The reason that you get the inheritance is not because you work so darn hard he owes you now. It's because you diligently followed his son. He calls you child, and so he's going to give you all that's his. Keep a finger here. Go back to Romans 8 with me, because that's what we just read really brings this to life. It pops off the page when you keep in mind what we just read. And go to Romans 8, verse 16 and 17. Brenda, would you read those verses for us? Romans 8, 16, 17.
The Spirit himself bears witness with our spirits that we are children of God, and if children, then heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together.
I'm pretty sure that's like one of the best summary statements for the book of Revelation I've ever seen. We are heirs of God, co-heirs with Christ, if what? We share in his sufferings, that we may share in his glory. That is exactly what we just read in Revelation 21. That's why the cowards don't get this, because they're not going to suffer for Jesus. They just want all the glory. Suffering comes along, and they're like, And they're just like the seed on the rocky soil. When the heat of persecution comes, they shrivel. They lose the kingdom vision. So keep in mind, you're heirs of God, co-heirs with Christ. Jesus inherits everything because he is the faithful son. And because you belong to him, he wants to share it with you. He said, guys, I got the whole universe. You want to share it? Okay, thanks, Jesus. It's so great. Like if Noah, our oldest son, I don't know, got some big reward from us for doing a good job, and he goes home like, hey, guys, there's way more here than I need. You want some? Thanks, bro. And that's pretty much exactly what we're looking forward to. Jesus deserves the whole thing, but he's going to be delighted to share it with his faithful followers. All right. I'm not quite at the pace I wanted to be because I'm going further in depth than I meant to, but it's so good. As it keeps going, it's really going to give us a description of the holy city. We've already looked at the significance, partly, of what that is, that it's coming down out of heaven from God. But as you look at the details of the city, which we're not going to do, it almost seems like the description is meant to baffle and amaze. It's just unspeakably ornate and rich and valuable. Everything in it is pure and valuable. There's nothing of mediocre quality. There's nothing that's throwaway. Everything is just pristine and valuable. And there's a lot you could say about that. But let's skip to verse 22 to 27. Cindy, if you'd read that for us.
I saw no temple in the city, for the Lord God's Almighty and the Lamb are its temple. And the city has no need of sun or moon, for the glory of God illuminates the city, and the Lamb is its light. The nations will walk in its light, and the King of the world will enter the city in all their glory. Its gates will never be closed at the end of the day, because there is no night there. and all the nations will bring their glory and honor into the city. Nothing evil will be allowed to enter, nor anyone who practices shameful, literally, I don't know that word, and it dishonestly will, but only those whose names are written in the Lamb Book will be there.
Okay, now there's so much significance to some of these things. I just want to make sure we don't skip anything important here. So there's no temple there. All the way through the vision, and this is another thing that makes me think of the sea being the fountain rather than the ocean. All the way through John's vision of heaven, he spent a lot of time in heaven seeing stuff, okay? Even looking down on the earth when stuff's happening. He's been in heaven a lot of in spirit, watching this. There was a temple in heaven while he had this vision. Because he talked about the doors of the temple opening, and he saw God inside, and the incense from the altar. He saw a temple there the whole time. Now notice what's going on. Now that God's made everything new, and he's moved his headquarters to the planet Earth, no temple. There's no temple. Because God's there on his throne. This is, everything's changing. In the way God interacts with people, it's all so different and so much better, because it's not just a I'll be with you in spirit kind of thing, which is awesome. I don't want to take away from that. It's not just I'll be with you in that Ark of the Covenant down there inside that building. It's I'm all in. There's no part of me that's not with you, right? Oh, so great. No temple, because the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple. There's no need for a house of God, because the whole of creation, the whole earth now, gets to be the home we share together with him. Notice it says the city. Now, this is one thing I wanted to tickle your brain about, because this tickles my brain. There's a whole planet Earth here, right? Like he created a whole new planet Earth. We're focusing on the city in the description, but we haven't really seen a description of the whole Earth. Just so you know, I did the calculation. Hold on a second. When it was in verse 16 that we didn't read. Okay, the dimensions of the city, okay, are just mind-numbing. They don't make sense to us. 1,400 miles-ish is about the approximate modern-day length. 1,400 miles wide, long. That I can stretch my mind to think of that. By the way, 1,400 miles is about halfway across the U.S.
1,300 wide.
Sure. Okay. So wide and long. The city is taking up most of the United States of America, but then it says it's also that tall.
Oh.
What the world? I can't even conceive of that. I'm like, is that how tall God is? Like, why would a city have to be that tall? Anywho, think of how large the city is. But the earth is still there. The city's taking up a huge chunk of the earth, but the earth is still there. So think of this. It says the city doesn't need the sun or the moon to shine on it, for God lives there and he's the light for the city. One thing that I'm not certain about, does the rest of the earth need light in the heavens, or is God's light enough for the entire planet? It's not said here. It says the city doesn't need any lights because God's there. But it doesn't mention the rest of the earth. That's a question I have. I'm wondering how that's going to go. Is there going to be nighttime on the rest of the globe? It's a question I have.
But if everybody's going to eat plants, they have to grow.
That's true.
So is it going to be, like, how's that going to work?
Well, there would still be daytime. I'm just wondering, is the day and night cycle still there, or is it just all daytime now? Are we like in Alaska during the summer? And that leads to another question, and I put it on the paper there. Will there be sleep? And again, this is total speculation. But one of the reasons our bodies need sleep now is to rejuvenate, to heal, and all those things. If our bodies are immortal and don't get hurt and don't wear down, maybe our bodies don't need that process anymore. I don't know. I really enjoy sleep. I think we'll rest, but I'm not sure if our bodies will have to sleep. I think we'll rest, but maybe sleep won't be needed there. Notice this. There's still nations. Did you notice that? The nations of the earth will go into the city, the capital city. The kings of the earth will bring their splendor and glory into the capital city. Are there still nations and still rulers in the new earth? I put on your paper, is this going to be an egalitarian society on earth, or is there still going to be a structure of leaders and classes? Will God appoint, and we're going to get to this, dang it, we're not going to get to today. We're going to get to this. Will there be people put in charge of cities, of regions, of whatever? Because what John doesn't say, and there were no more nations, there were no more kings. He just says they'll all be honoring the true king in his capital city. They'll be making their pilgrimages to honor him, right? So people will be living on the whole planet, and they'll be making their trips to the city to honor the true king, the high king. That part I missed most of my life. I always thought we'll all just be around the throne forever, singing, maybe playing harps. I started to get this picture. We're going to live on the planet. Like, really live. And we're going to make trips to the city because the king's there. Who doesn't want to go see the king, right? And we're going to bring our gifts to him to honor him. And then this is a reminder that my imagination takes off. In this world, we're going to be creative. I have no doubt about it. Because in Isaiah 65, we're building things, we're growing things, right? I think we're going to have time to master certain skills. I'm not sure that we're just going to instantly become experts at everything. I think we're going to use the time we have to grow in our skills to become great at it. I'd really love to learn how to do the guitar better. That's just one thing I'd like to do. I'd like to maybe grow in my artistic skills or a whole new set of skills I never even thought I'd enjoy. And can you imagine, let's say you're at home on whatever part of the planet, who knows how this all works, and you have that skill, whatever it is. Maybe you're making an instrument for music, and you work on it for however long because you've got all the time there is. And it's time for people in your area to go visit the king in the capital. You take this exquisite piece of work you've been working on with all your might, and you take it to give it as a gift to the king to show your honor and respect to him. And he receives it. And there's so much like earthly systems here that it almost seems like it can't be. But the description I'm seeing here, it actually adds up to a lot of earthly experience. Just better, just pure. And I do picture my eternity like that. I think I'm going to be in the capital city a lot of the time. I'm going to go home. And think one more thing that comes to mind about this. Again, I'm trying to think of what matches the earthly existence in the new earth existence. Think with me on the Levitical priesthood. I don't know if you've ever been real excited studying the Levitical priesthood, but here's one payoff for studying it. When God gave the nation of Israel the promised land, all the tribes except one got a chunk of it. What was the one tribe that did not get an allotment of land? Do you remember?
Wasn't it Levi?
The tribe of Levi didn't get a chunk of land. And you're like, that doesn't seem right. Like everyone else gets land, but not the Levites. And you remember what God said about that? Why did he not give a chunk of the land to the Levites? He said, because the land is your inheritance, I am their inheritance. I'm not going to give them land because they get to serve me. They have a privilege. So they were going to have to be scattered over all the other tribes' lands, given different little towns, but nothing was ever their own. They were living on their brothers' lands the whole time. Now, the Levites were spread all over. There was more Levites than were ever needed at one time to serve God. So how did it go? They would go live in their towns, their homes, or wherever they were, spread across the country. And when their number came up, their lot came up. Think of Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist. His lot was pulled and he went to serve at the temple. Same idea. So wherever you were, you knew it was your turn. You would make the trip to Jerusalem. You'd serve at the temple, do your duty, and you're so honored to do it. Then you go back. And you'd live until it was your turn to come back. Now remember, we're called priests, right? Like, come on with me. This is so good. Come with me. If we're called the priesthood, several times in the book of Revelation, also in the book of Peter, 1 Peter, what if this is the scenario? I'm just totally speculating, and I hope this is not a waste of time. But this is how I actually think this might be going. What if what God did with the Levitical priesthood is kind of a picture of what's ahead for us? We're all priests, and we're not all necessarily going to live in the capital city, but wherever we are in this whole new world, that's the inheritance for everybody. Whenever it's our turn, we get all excited because now we get to go back. Okay, good. And so we take whatever we want to as gifts, and we go on this pilgrimage back to the city, and we get to serve the God of the whole world in his city. And then when our turn's up, we go home, and the next shift is coming in. Now, this is not gospel truth. You're not going to read that in any texts. I'm just trying to put all the pieces together and think, what's it going to be like? That's one thought I have. Because people are going into the city and out of the city. Everybody's not living there all the time. Right? It says that. The nations come in with their glory and all that. And then notice this, the gates are never shut. Why are there gates in a city? Well, the city has walls if they want to protect themselves. So why do you have gates? Because if all you had were walls, no one's getting out. And no one's ever coming in. And so the gates were there to be something that could open and close to let the right people in and out and to keep the bad people out. So what does it mean, do you think, that the gates never close?
Well, there's no bad people. You don't have to protect them from anything.
No harm to fear. There's no intruders. There's no enemies at the gates. So you don't have to close them. There's no security problem here. And that also means no one will ever be kept out. No one's ever going to want to come into the city and they say, close, it's him again. You know, just because God has no time for you. No. The gates of the city, there'll be free travel in and out because God's accessible to his people now, right? So awesome. Nothing impure. Now, we're not going to get to the last page of this. Page 15. I do want to get to that. We can't leave that out. But just to finish out our look at Revelation, we'll go to chapter 22 real quick because we only have a few minutes left. But let's see, who are we? Georgia, would you read verses 1 through 5?
Then the angel showed me the river of the water of life, as clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and of the Lamb, down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. And the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. The throne of God and of the Lamb will be in the city, and his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. There will be no more night. They will not need the light of a lamp or the light of the sun, for the Lord God will give them light, and they will reign forever and ever.
Oh my gosh. So the two things that are pictured by the throne are this great river of the water of life, again, of life, and then the tree of life. Notice, I don't know, did you see the weird language here? It's a single tree, but what do you notice about it? It's growing on both sides of the river.
Yeah.
The tree of, it doesn't say the trees of life, it says the tree of life is growing on both sides of the river. It probably doesn't mean too much there, but it's such an interesting thing. It's still giving us the image of the Eden experience of the tree of life, but there's more than one, really. It's available on both sides of the river. You're not ever cut off from it. Again, that picture of eating and drinking life. Life is flowing from God's throne, and life is going to fill his new world, and it's never going to end. Because God's name for himself is Yahweh. And the meaning of that is the I am. He is existence. He is life itself. It emanates from his being, and he's never going to run out of that. He's not going to pitter out, 8 million years into the future like they say our sun's going to do eventually. There's no loss of energy for God. So whatever flows out of him will keep flowing out of him. This is why I believe eternal life isn't a gift that's just given one time. I think it's a gift he's going to keep on deciding to give. It's just going to keep coming out of him, and he's going to keep offering it to us, and we're going to keep taking it. Our entire eternal future is going to be a future of grace, God giving life and our gladly receiving it. Notice just a couple more details. In verse 2, the leaves of the tree are for what?
Healing the nations.
Again, the nations are still here. If the nations are done away with, there's no need to heal them with these leaves. They're still nations, people groups. The word for nations there is ethnos. The same word Jesus said when he said, make disciples of all peoples, not nations like political nations, but people groups. I'm wondering, because John saw this in his vision, people from every tribe, nation, language, and tongue, right? I'm wondering if we're still going to be distinctly ethnic. I don't think that he's going to eradicate different skin colors just because it's a new creation. I don't think it was a mistake in the first place, right? I don't think it was because of sin that there's different skin tones. It's because of the marvel of the DNA code he put into Mom Eve and Father Adam. It wasn't a sin thing that led to the ethnicities. Would there be any reason to think he's done with ethnicities? And by the way, which ethnicity would he prefer? Which is the real ethnicity? No, I think they're all legit, they're all good, and I have no reason to think he'd ever take that away. Because, by the way, your ethnicity is a part of who you are. And you're going to be forever. So I don't know why he would strip our ethnicity away from us. When he gives us a new body, is it possible the dark-skinned person will get a new body with dark skin, and the light-skinned person will get a body with light skin? Why not? Again, there's nothing intrinsically impure about anyone's skin tone. So this idea of the ethnos, the nation, the people groups are finding healing in this tree. The word ethnos there tells me there might be these ethnicities, but what's the cool thing about this new world? We're not going to make a big deal out of our differences in a negative way. I don't think we're going to be cordoned off, oh, the dark-skinned people are in that realm of the new world. It's time for the dark-skins to come into the city. No. I don't think that's going to determine anything about us. It's just, it'll be a celebration of God's creative diversity. Why not? I think that's cool. And by the way, there's no reason to think Adam and Eve were created to be white folks anyway, right? So, which ethnicity would he pick if he did? I don't know. I have no idea. It certainly doesn't have to be mine. Final thing, I wanted to look at verse 4 with you. Leading up to verse 4, his servants will serve him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their foreheads. That has already been brought up in the vision that John had, being marked as a servant of God rather than a servant of the beast. But notice this detail. They will see his face. That's different. In no human experience has that ever been allowed. Moses wasn't even allowed to look on his face. Remember? He had to hide him in the rock with his hand, and then when he passed by, he's like, okay, get a peek at the back. Just get a peek at my back. Because he said, it's too much for you. You can't handle this. Now, all the old stuff is dead. All that's perishable has perished. So what's left can handle it. We're going to be built to handle his glory. We're going to be built to handle his face. We get to gaze upon the face. I don't even know what that means because he's a spirit, whatever. But it's going to be so amazing. We get to look on our God without fear, without cringing. And think of what a difference that is from the people at Sinai when they heard God's voice. They're like, hey, Moses, you go. No more cringing, no more any of this. It's full relationship with Father. There's no hiding anything anymore from each other. So, that's a look. That's a pretty intense look. Shorts. We kind of did zoom through it, but I hope you get excited about our future as being more than just not hell. I hope you see the fullness of this life we're going to have. Satisfying, creative, adventurous. I have no doubt we're going to explore the new world, discover things on it, harness it. Just like we did in this one, we'll just do it right this time. We won't do it selfishly. We'll do it for the honor of the Father. We'll do it as responsible stewards of the new earth. So just so you know, you're not going to lose out on anything you enjoy. If anything, it'll just be ramped up to its fullest. And again, you're going to have to decide for yourself whether you think this is mice singing about no cats in America, streets full of, made of cheese. Is this pie in the sky? Is this just making people feel better when their loved ones die? Or is this actually your future, right? Oh, gosh. What you decide on that will determine a lot of how you live in this present life.
Why would he put the names on? He puts his name on your forehead. What would that purpose serve if we're all his children there at the time?
I think, again, this is a question of literal or poetic, but as you look at the way that marking has, it was in Ezekiel, and then it shows up again in Revelation, and it really had simply to do almost like slaves would be branded for their master. Mm-hmm. It was a way of identifying that I'm with him. Okay. I belong to him. So whether we're literally going to walk around with, the divine tattoo, I don't know. But I think the reason it's mentioned is to show it's universal that we all serve him. Because earlier in the book of Revelation, it wasn't universal. There were those marked by the beast, and there were those marked for the living God. So now I think his point is, everything you just read up to this time, that's not true anymore. It's only him. All will serve him and be glad to do it,